Okay, well, good afternoon. I'm Marcia Ferranto. I am the CEO here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum, and I welcome you here today. I would especially like to welcome Senator Coons as well as Senator Blunt. Thank you for making this time for us here today. I would also like to recognize these good-looking cadets in the room. Check it out. Welcome. It is always so great to see young faces choosing law enforcement as a career path. So congratulations to you. The National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum represents the only law enforcement campus in this country. On one side of the campus, we honor the fallen. The 23,229 line of duty deaths. On this side of the campus, we honor the story of American law enforcement. So if you're ever arriving on the campus and you think you're going to find something in honor instead of honor, you're in the wrong place. We're here to honor law enforcement. We also have a great focus on officer safety and wellness. And the reason for that is because annually we release a fatality report representing all the data, all the facts behind why law enforcement officers are losing their life in the line of duty. It is our effort to keep names off the wall. So having this Law Enforcement Caucus field hearing here at the National Law Enforcement Museum is the perfect backdrop for these conversations. And we have every intention of keeping these conversations going forward. And we have every intention to do everything that we can do here at the National Law Enforcement Museum to connect law enforcement with the communities they serve. Safe communities equals safe law enforcement, and safe law enforcement results in safe communities. So at this time, I would like to welcome Senator Coons and Senator Blunt. We're going to hear from Senator Coons first, and then after that, we'll hear from Senator Blunt. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you, and to Marcia. Marcia Ferranto has a long history in leadership in important nonprofits, not least of which in my home state of Delaware. So it is great to connect with you, and it's great to be on this campus with you. And to the men and women of law enforcement who are here, thank you. Thank you to those who are beginning your careers in service. Thank you to those who will share with us today from your long history, your service career, and for a number of the speakers. I wish I could stay for all of your presentation, but know that Senator Blunt and I deeply appreciate what you're bringing to this session of the Law Enforcement Caucus. And to Thomas Canavan and to the staff, thank you so much for your work to pull this together. I do want to say a few words, if I could, about my friend and colleague, Senator Roy Blunt, before I go any further. We were elected to the Senate in 2010, and we found each other around a conversation, which was about where's the Law Enforcement Caucus? As folks who had a history of working in local government, folks who had a connection to law enforcement in our home states, we assumed there was a robust, vibrant caucus already existing in the Senate that would connect federal law enforcement to state and local, and would be something we could simply join. But having discovered there wasn't one, we decided to launch one together. And Roy, I cannot think of a greater blessing than the chance I've had to learn from you, to work with you, and to do so many good and meaningful things together with you. You have been an outstanding partner in this work. Law enforcement, as some of you may know, is a topic that occasionally runs into some political headwinds or has some challenges. And that the two of us over this period of time have managed to continue reliably going forward with substantive events around policing and cybercrime, around bulletproof vests and sustaining a federal investment in making bulletproof vests available to state and local officers, the use of data to help ensure that we're smart on crime locally and nationally, an event on youth mentoring and police community relations, an event on children's advocacy centers and how we could work together to authorize and fund the prevention of child abuse and the effective investigation and prosecution of those who commit these horrific crimes, and an event on information sharing between federal, state, and local law enforcement. This is just a few of the many events we've done together. When we began this caucus, we had a few simple goals to raise awareness and support for law enforcement initiatives, to facilitate the exchange of ideas, to advocate for things like today that would enhance officer safety and wellness, and to strengthen and sustain partnerships between federal, state, and local law enforcement, and to do it with a sense of humor. Probably my favorite thing that we've done over these 11 years is an annual recognition and thank you session with Capitol Police. It's turned into a bit of a bake-off. We've ended up competing between our offices and on some years between our families over who could bake more and deliver more. And I think it's become one of the favorites of the holiday season for Capitol Police. So I just could not start today without saying a thank you to someone who has been one of the greatest partners of my 22-year career in county and federal service. So thank you, Roy. Just a few brief points, if I could, about how we've managed to find ways to work together. Last month, in celebration of National Police Week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, on which I serve, unanimously advanced several bills to support law enforcement, including one specifically addressing PTSD, one supporting de-escalation training and crisis response, funding smaller agency, and another one expanding disability benefits. I was proud to be at the White House last month for the signing of an executive order that includes provisions on training and officer wellness, areas of needed reform around use of force and no-knock warrants, and has been endorsed by a broad range of law enforcement groups as well as civil rights organizations. So it shows to me that there are areas where we can find agreement and where we can still work together and find a way forward. That spirit of consensus building and bipartisanship brings me to the topics that we will hear about today. Law enforcement officers, as we all know all too well, are exposed to trauma, stressful encounters at which their lives are at risk, and we have to recognize that it is also a source of trauma to be constantly or even occasionally reviewing either the details of violent events or images, whether the sexual abuse of children or images of murder victims that provide long-term impacts that we need to better understand and we need to better address. Law enforcement suicides are now a leading cause of line of duty death, and we have to find ways working together to reduce the stigma for law enforcement seeking help. The U.S. military has also stepped forward to address what is a tragic toll on our veterans. The unitary structure of the military makes that easier because there is one United States military, although there's different branches and there's active and reserve and National Guard, but law enforcement is in 18,000 agencies across the United States without any one single organization that is in a position to incentivize, drive, and require a better response. So Senator Blunt and I have a bill with Senator Grassley to take an important step towards addressing these challenges, one that I think we can and should make progress on in our remaining months of service together this year. I'm excited that Captain Jennifer Griffin, Dr. Griffin of the University of Delaware from our Delaware State Police is here as one of the speakers today to bring her 22 years of law enforcement experience to bear. She literally wrote her Ph.D. dissertation on stress in law enforcement. So thank you specifically, Captain Griffin, for your contribution today. We'll also hear remarks about how to respond to mental health events in our community and how we shouldn't be requiring or forcing law enforcement to take on roles they're not trained for as therapists or as social workers. Jurisdictions across the country are recognizing the value of ways to incorporate trained professionals in assisting law enforcement. In Delaware, the Newcastle County Police Department, which I used to be responsible for as county executive, has been a real leader in this by creating a behavioral health unit that pairs mental health clinicians with officers to respond to calls that by the dispatch records are demonstrably related to mental health. They partnered with our largest healthcare provider, Christiana Care, to provide case managers, registered nurses, clinicians, and child victim advocates to be part of a team deployed alongside officers. So I very much look forward to this presentation today, to reviewing it, and just wanted to conclude by saying again how much I have valued and how much I treasure the working partnership of my friend and colleague, Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. Please give him a rousing round of applause.
Well, thank you, Chris. This is my last year in the Senate, my 26th year in the Congress, and there are a few things I'll miss about the Congress a lot, and at the top of that list would be the people you get to work with. One of my strengths has always been to recognize somebody else's good idea. I think it was actually Chris who said, there's no Law Enforcement Caucus. We should start one. And I said, we absolutely should start one. And then we've had a chance to work together on a lot more law enforcement issues than we might have imagined at the time. And Marcia, thanks for your leadership here. And as you pointed out earlier, this facility has been actually closed longer than it was open because of COVID. So it'll be a good time to begin to see people really have the experience of coming here and thinking about law enforcement and focusing on what people in law enforcement do. And frankly, one of the big groups I think we never want to leave out when we talk about law enforcement are families. I think law enforcement, being a law enforcement officer may be the hardest job in America today, but it's possible that being somebody who cares about you every day could be even harder. You have a sense of knowing when you're in a moment of more often than not of imminent danger, though we've seen some tragedies where officers have been ambushed and totally unacceptable in a peaceful society to see that happen. But your family doesn't know. And from the moment you leave the house in the morning till you get back at night, or till you call your mom or your brother or your sister, whoever's that person that is most engaged every day, somebody's wondering what's happening to you and are you safe? And in this environment we've been in the last couple of years, they're wondering that without the traditional respect, I think, that law enforcement has always relied on in our country. And I think that respect is clearly returning and should return. Glad to be here with Captain Griffin. Every state has a state agency that provides the kind of services that Delaware has. Not all of them have a captain who's also a Ph.D. who really has focused on the meaning of the job and how the job impacts community and how community impact the people who tried to do this job. And Brent McGinty, who is really our behavioral health leader in our state of running the state agency of the behavioral health organizations. I want to talk about that just a little bit as we talk about the moment we're in while we're here today. We saw the tragedy in Uvalde, Texas, of 19 school kids, elementary school kids killed, 2 teachers killed. A few days before that, a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, where somebody walks in and needlessly takes life. And I think one of the challenges for the Congress right now is, one, this is not the first time this happened. And I think a lot of people in America are asking, well, can you do something? And frankly, finding a way we can move forward as a group may be even more important than what we figured out how to move forward on. One of those pieces I think has to be to continue to look at our mental health structure and how we deal with mental health like we deal with all other health. I said it, the Republican leadership in the Senate, and I was in the House when I was in the House as well, but I said at our press event yesterday that while we're talking about this, and I do want to talk about mental health, and you'll know how involved I've been and think it's important. We want to be sure when we're talking about mental health that we don't somehow put mental health back in a place where you think that if you admit you've got a mental health problem, you're admitting to the society you're somehow dangerous. The National Institute of Health, located here in Bethesda, Maryland, says that 1 in 5 adult Americans has a diagnosable and almost always treatable behavioral health issue. Now, they don't suggest that 1 in 5 adult Americans figures that out, knows what that is, and deals with it the right way. But this is a pervasive challenge in our society. Senator Stabenow, a Democrat from Michigan, and I went to the Senate floor on the last day of October 2013. We'd introduced a bill we called Excellence in Mental Health, the goal to try to treat mental health like all other health. But we went to the floor on that date because it was the 50th anniversary of the last bill that President Kennedy signed into law, the Community Mental Health Act. Last bill he signed before 3 weeks later he was assassinated. And we went through the Community Mental Health Act, and there were lots of facilities that act anticipated needed to be and would be closed, the kind of congregate facilities that were more warehouses than they were treatment facilities needed to be closed, and they were almost all closed. And there were also a large discussion of what would replace those facilities, and most of that didn't happen. And so for decades now, the police and the emergency room, police departments and the emergency rooms of America have become the de facto mental health delivery system. And nobody benefits from that. People who have a mental health problem don't benefit from that. The emergency room doesn't benefit from that. Police don't benefit from that. And none of the other work that police would be doing if they weren't involved in that time-consuming effort of trying to deal with somebody who has a mental problem like it was a criminal problem, nobody benefits. And so what we've done with Excellence in Mental Health, we finally wound up with an 8-state pilot. 24 states applied, 19 states went through the whole process of trying to be part of that 8-state pilot, where we treat mental health like all other health, and also, and Brent's going to talk about this, so I don't want to get into take his speech away from him because he can do it a lot better than I can, but also trying to keep track of all the other health challenges that 1 in 5 adult Americans would have. And when you think about that, there'd be a lot of challenges you'd have that would be other health challenges. And my view has always been that we'd see a substantial reduction in the other healthcare costs if you deal with the mental health care costs like they were any other health problem. People would more likely show up for appointments, whether that's a normal visit with a doctor or dialysis or whatever it is. People more likely take whatever kind of medicine they're supposed to take, whether it's a behavioral health medicine or their other medicines. People more will eat better, sleep better, feel better about themselves. And I think we're after 5 years now of our original 8 states, which has expanded into 10 states that have this program everywhere in the state, and 31 other states that have substantial units that have qualified with the 24/7 availability that's necessary, the level of professional staff that the law requires for you to be part of this. And I think that's part of the solution here of moving toward a more substantial mental health system that functions in absolute lockstep with the rest of healthcare. And what we don't want to do is create a sense where somehow if you're part of that system, you're more dangerous than the people who aren't part of that system. In fact, people with a behavioral health issue, and those of you in law enforcement know this better than anybody, people with a behavioral health issue are more likely to be the victims of a crime than they are the perpetrators of a crime. And what we've seen so often in these issues where people have gotten into a place that you'd want no one to be, is you've got someone who's suicidal who also becomes homicidal as part of being suicidal. Whether it's the other issues we need to be talking about and are of background checks for young gun buyers, or other things that make that system work better, some way to alert someone in the community if you believe a person is going to be a danger to themselves or others, the red flag laws. Some states call them yellow flag laws. But we have a chance for all of that to come together in some kind of bill that 60 or more of the senators are willing to vote for, and meeting the do something standard, and then see what we need to do next. You know, one of the great things about democracy is if you have expectations that it's always going to be solved exactly the way you want it to be solved personally, you're going to be disappointed. You know, nobody gets what they want all the time anywhere, including the Senate of the United States or the Congress of the United States or home, and trying to find that place where a democracy comes together and helps as you work on these problems. And, you know, in law enforcement, crisis intervention, probably the biggest single thing that happens in the daily life of law enforcement contacts. And how you deal with that crisis. Senator Cornyn and I have a bill that Chris is also part of, just to provide some de-escalation training. Our state, most states have efforts. We put some things, we've worked together to put some things in the federal law that allows you to come in and recognize as much as you can whether a problem is really a criminal problem or it's a problem you need to solve in some other way. And having somewhere to go besides the emergency room, having some kind of contact. We've got groups of people in our state, groups of police forces that use an iPad that's connected to a 24/7 facility that whenever they need to work with someone and quickly understand it's beyond what they're going to solve right there by themselves, that it needs to be dealt with right there. That iPad, and talking to the iPad, the person who is a mental health professional. I've seen it happen. I've gone with officers and watched them do this, and it makes a big difference. Telehealth, another big opportunity in behavioral health, where often the screen is less threatening than the individual in the room would be, and making those things work. But I'm going to maybe take a couple of your statistics here, Brent, but in one case, looking at the broad case of the 8 states that have had this the longest, emergency room visits have gone down about 60%. Time of incarceration has also gone down about 60%. Homelessness has gone down about 40%, just because there was some system in place that got in the way of all those things happening. You know, Chris and I are grateful for what you do. We're grateful for people who are willing to step in the line of danger and protect the rest of us. We do see our friends at the Capitol Police every day, and of course they've had a challenge in the last couple of years that exceeds any challenge they've had before. I went to the floor only a few days ago and talked about the 4 line of duty deaths we'd had in our state in law enforcement in the last year. 3 of them were within 19 days of each other in different locations. So this is not an easy time, but it's an important time. It's an important time particularly for people who are entering the force and becoming the future leaders in law enforcement to be thinking about the things you're thinking about today. And I'm delighted to be able to be with you. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Thomas Canavan, and I am the Executive Director for the National Law Enforcement Museum. I would like to thank Senator Blunt and Senator Coons for being here with us today. We're going to move into the presentation component of our program today. Following our presentations, we're going to have some time for questions and answers period. So I want to encourage everybody to ask questions if you have them after hearing today's presentations. Our first speaker, who will provide our keynote address for today, as well as moderate our question and answer period, is my friend and colleague, Troy Anderson. It is my privilege to work with Troy, and I'm very excited that everyone here gets the opportunity to hear more about his work here with the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund. Mr. Anderson began his career in law enforcement more than 30 years ago as a U.S. Army military police officer and served in combat operations in the Middle East during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. He continued his work in law enforcement later as a correction officer for the state of Connecticut and as a municipal police officer in the state of Massachusetts. Mr. Anderson served the Connecticut State Police as a sergeant for 26 years, retiring as the Director of Wellness and Resilience. Following the tragic and unthinkable school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, Mr. Anderson managed the response of the Connecticut State Police peer support, chaplaincy, and CISM teams that were deployed on site and tasked with providing interventions and debriefings for the affected members of the state police, municipal and federal law enforcement partners, first responder staff, support personnel, embedded clinicians, and state senior executives. Mr. Anderson was the recipient of the 2013 International Critical Incident Stress Foundation World Congress Co-Founders Award for Excellence in Critical Intervention and Disaster Response based on his work with the Sandy Hook Elementary School tragedy. The 2016 Officer Paul Buchanan Memorial Peer Support Award for extraordinary leadership and dedication to mental health and well-being, and has presented extensively on prevention, critical incident stress management, and law enforcement peer support across North America, Europe, and Asia. Please join me in welcoming Troy Anderson.
I'd like to meet that guy. I'd like to echo the sentiments of Marcia and everybody welcoming you here. It's so great to have you all here. I like to see young faces getting into law enforcement. I hope that none of this topic scares you away. That would be the intent, because if I was sitting in your seat many years ago, I may second guess it after what we're about to talk about, because this is a heavy subject. So what I'm going to do is sort of take you on a journey to look at the overall climate of where we are in law enforcement today. And I think we've talked and we've seen and we've experienced, and over the last couple of years, it's been a difficult couple of years. So we're going to kind of go on that journey, and then hopefully we'll end in a place where we can have some solutions. Then, as we get done with all of our presentations today, we're going to sort of gravitate over here. I would encourage you, as we're here today, if you have questions, as you formulate those questions, sort of keep them in your head, maybe text them to yourself on the phone. But either way, we'd love to hear from you at the end. We'll have an opportunity with the panelists to get up here and talk. So, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, which is the leading national authority on official line of duty deaths, produces a much anticipated yearly report. Preliminary data from the 2021 end-of-year National Law Enforcement Officers Fatality Report revealed eye-opening statistics, which caused reason for national concern. 458 law enforcement officers made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives in the line of duty last year. The leading cause of death in 2021 was to COVID-19 related illness, with a total of 301 deaths. That's a significant number. It's the highest number that we have ever seen. 458 last year. It's the highest number we had ever seen. And now we're going to talk a little bit. Struck by accidents, 58 officers died in traffic-related crashes, and struck by fatalities were up by 93% last year. Unthinkable. Finally, 84 officers died from felonious assaults, including 61 officers who were killed by firearm, an increase of 36%. The goal of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund Officer Safety and Wellness Program is to reduce line of duty deaths and injuries by providing safety and wellness resources to law enforcement officers. To achieve our goal, we partner with federal agencies, corporations, and nonprofit organizations to develop and disseminate officer safety and wellness education information, programming specifically focused on identifying best practice programs. And the mission of our work remains to make the vocation of law enforcement safer for those who serve and to keep the names off of the memorial wall. One of our primary initiatives in our OSW program is Destination Zero, which yearly recognizes the top officer safety and wellness programs from around the nation with the National Officer Safety and Wellness Awards. Destination Zero also maintains a repository of best practice programs for officer safety and wellness on our website and provides a wide array of resources ranging from brochures to videos and posters to training presentations. At no time in our nation's history has there ever been a greater need to rally our collective support around the advancement of law enforcement safety and wellness. As law enforcement emerges from a difficult period where we have overcome obstacles associated with policing during an unprecedented pandemic and have seen firsthand the erosion of community support in the wake of civil discontent, law enforcement professionals have had to contend with the fear of funding reductions, and administrators have been forced to reduce in-person training in favor of online. Recruitment efforts nationally continue to suffer dwindling numbers, while the exodus from the profession has experienced a spike not seen in decades. All of this has led to lower morale among officers, increased concerns over perceived lack of support at a time when it is needed most. The totality of these factors has had a damaging impact on the law enforcement culture. All of this has arisen during a period when the duties and expectations of rank and file officers continue to expand. Reductions in the ranks have forced mandatory shift extensions necessary to backfill staffing shortages. Increased exposure to trauma and assaults, and even with the advances in training and safety technology, the job has become increasingly more difficult and dangerous. War is being waged against our nation's law enforcement, and this needs to be our call to action as a civilized society. The profession of policing is one of individual service and family sacrifice. Repeated exposure to helping people during their worst times and missing countless family events comes with a personal cost. This cost is measured in the reduction of quality of many officers' lives, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. It is measured in post-traumatic stress injuries, increased rates of substance abuse, divorce rates, stress-related illness, and sadly, suicides. My views on this topic are not anecdotal. They are a lived experience over 3 decades of wearing a badge. I have responded to a mass casualty school shooting, as you heard, countless deadly use of force events. I have mourned the loss of coworkers killed in the line of duty more than once. I have worked the suicides of law enforcement colleagues. I have received physical injuries on the job. I've been assaulted. I've made numerous death notifications to people's loved ones and have received medals for trying to save the lives of complete strangers. And I've struggled to find the right words to provide comfort to individuals as they took their last breath. I understand that service and sacrifice. Throughout my career in the wellness field, I have assisted coworkers circling the bowl of despair, sidelined by burnout, cynicism, substance abuse, and failed relationships, only to be followed by resignations, terminations, and suicidal ideations. So many of this damage resulting from a job that they once loved, a job that many rookie officers would tell you they would do for free. These were men and women that took an oath to enforce the law and protect the public. But no one signed up to do a job that one day would leave them feeling isolated, abandoned, or worse. I've made it my life's work to help the helper. These efforts began in 2005 when I established the first of its kind peer support program, State Troopers Offering Peer Support, or STOPS, for the Connecticut State Police. During my tenure as state coordinator over a 10-year period, the STOPS program realized more than 13,000 contacts, new and ongoing, without a single breach of confidentiality. It grew over time to represent more than just rank and file troopers, but command staff and dispatchers as well. STOPS also housed our 2 critical incident stress management teams, chaplaincy teams, crisis intervention teams, military support program, and family support initiatives. STOPS was supported with legislative intent and went on to receive international recognition following the tragic school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012. It became the fabric of the agency and marshaled the culture of wellness. In short, this program saved lives. American law enforcement practices require a solutions-oriented, standardized approach, confidential peer support programs with selection and uniform training practices, law enforcement chaplaincy programs with culturally competent representatives of all denominations, resilience-based mindfulness programs, and new officer and recruit training, yearly check-ins with clinicians trained in law enforcement stress, a campaign to combat stigma, mandatory debriefings for all officers exposed to critical events, physical fitness requirements and incentives designed to keep officers healthier and on the job beyond just the time that they're on the job, to keep them safe, retirement counseling, comfort animals in the workplace, suicide recognition and prevention training, variations to officer schedules based on the effects of shift work, meditation practices, restrictions of off-duty work to encourage rest, ongoing family support programs, crisis intervention team programs to support officers working with community members in crisis, post-critical incident seminars, and military support programs to assist deploying and reintegrating citizen soldiers from the law enforcement field. The question is not who is going to create these worthwhile programs. There is no need to reinvent the wheel because all of these programs have been implemented and exist somewhere in this country. The question is, how are we going to make these life-saving programs accessible to every officer nationally? And that conversation starts here. Inscribed on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial across the street from where we are today, there is a verse. In valor, there is hope. That hope still exists somewhere in every law enforcement professional in America. Hope for a civilized nation and world. Hope that they may go home to their loved ones at the conclusion of their shift, and hope that society appreciates their dedication to doing what's right in the face of adversity, and hope that our nation's leaders work cooperatively to make their profession safer for those still serving. When I returned home from Desert Storm more than 30 years ago, we were welcomed home by a long stream of Vietnam veterans who had come out, and they were welcoming us and shaking our hands as we were walking down. So as I saw all these veterans, they were just so appreciative of our safe return. They were shaking our hands, and when I got to the end, we kind of all broke up, and I said to one of the veterans, one of the Vietnam veterans, I said, "Who are you here to see?" And he said, "Oh, we're here to see you guys." And I said, "Well, do you know anybody in particular?" He said, "No, where'd you come from?" He said, "We came from 2 states away." I said, "Why did you travel so far to greet people that you don't even know?" And he said to me, "We know too much to get it wrong this time." I will tell you that what we do from this point forward in officer safety and wellness is going to affect generations of people in law enforcement. We know too much to get it wrong this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. At this time, we would like to welcome Captain Jennifer Griffin from the Delaware State Police. Captain Griffin is a patrol operations commander, creator and chair of the Employee Wellness Unit for the Delaware State Police, an adjunct professor at the University of Delaware, a certified performance coach, and yoga instructor. She has over 22 years of law enforcement experience and has a doctorate from the University of Delaware, Sociology and Criminal Justice Department, where she currently teaches 4 classes. Her dissertation is titled, "Are We Protecting Those Who Protect Us? Stress and Law Enforcement in the 21st Century." She is an FBI National Academy Associate Training Committee member and Comprehensive Officer Resilience Program Master Instructor, active bystandship for law enforcement trainer, and a recognized resiliency subject matter expert with the United States Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center. Sorry, that was one word. Otherwise known as CRITAC. She is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy Session 268 a peer-reviewed author, and presents nationally and internationally as a recognized subject matter expert throughout the United States of America, China, Taiwan, and Canada. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Griffin.
So good afternoon. So first, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very pleased and very honored to be here to speak to all of you today, especially that we have recruits in the class. Probably one of the most proud moments I had as in my career is 2 years at our training academy. There's nothing better than seeing young women and men facing the challenges today and taking them up as we continue to move into the challenging era that we're currently in. So policing has always been and will always be an evolving and challenging profession. Law enforcement grapples with the daily challenges to provide professional and competent law enforcement services to their communities while balancing the demands and the limitations of the resources they have available to them. Law enforcement officers are on the front lines to protecting our democracy and our communities. The past 2 years certainly provided not just one, but several crises to propagate new insights and opportunities. The pandemic forced us to grapple with personal safety concerns, new and unique challenges in the family and work domains, and precautionary measures against an invisible and non-discriminatory threat in COVID-19. Besides civil unrest, discontent, police reform and transparency demands have added to the current overwhelming constraints and strains on police leaders and officers. Regardless of the past or what law enforcement will become in the future, the demand for police officers to respond and assist communities will continue. The question will be, in what condition physically, mentally, and emotionally will those officers show up if we do not take concerted steps to improve and enhance their wellness and resiliency? This presentation is based on a quantitative and qualitative research study that I did of a Mid-Atlantic police organization. Scholarly works is intermingled with real-life stories to show officers and agencies how to increase officer and agency wellness and resilience. The information and strategies show you that the challenges officers face are great, but our collective efforts are greater. What inspires me every day are the selfless and kind acts of the troopers that I am privileged to lead and represent. I've witnessed troopers use their own money on more than one occasion to buy a meal for someone, to pay for safe transportation to get them safely to their destination, and I have unfortunately buried too many officers who have given their lives in the service of our communities. What worries and drives me to engage in discussions like this are the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of the officers. What other profession in the United States of America gets up every day and night and puts on a bulletproof vest as they get ready for work? Who kiss and hug their loved ones, knowing that they may never kiss and hug that loved one again? The profession is law enforcement. Although it's not just a profession or a career, it's truly a calling. Unfortunately, a calling that fewer individuals are gravitating towards, and more officers are retiring or resigning before retirement. The overall research question in my study was to examine whether demographic characteristics and assignment affect police officers' work-family conflict, resilience, stress, and burnout, and whether work-family conflict and resiliency mediate the stress and burnout of officers. To research this question, as I said, I distributed a survey to a state police organization in the Mid-Atlantic. A total of 138 officers, or 21% of the agency, filled out the surveys. 3 learning objectives. First, you'll be able to recognize stress contributing challenges, such as burnout and work-family conflict. You'll be able to describe positive and negative emotional impacts. And lastly, implement agency supportive organizational programs to promote health, wellness, and resilience. To lay the groundwork for our discussion, I'm going to first start with a brief overview of the issues or the variables. The first is stress. Stress is a transactional concept. It links the stress sourcer or stressor to individual responses and coping mechanisms. Due to organizational culture mandates and working environment, police stress tend to be shaped daily by intertwined internal and external influences, most of the time outside of the law enforcement officer's control. Early studies classified police stress into 2 categories, organizational and occupational. The former comes from organization's nature, such as bureaucracy, work hours, supervisor, subordinate relations. The latter, mainly from police work's nature, characterizes dangerous and unpredictable. The next variable is work-family conflict, which occurs when an individual experiences incompatible demands between work and family roles, causing participation in both becoming more difficult. This imbalance creates conflicts for the officers. For good or bad, policing isn't just a career that stops at the end of the shift, but a way of life that seeps into every part of an officer's being. The past few years have made the blur and division between work and family life even more distorted. A primary source of police stress is work-family conflict. That is, participating in both creates stress for each other. Many adults identify their family and work as central to their identities and lives, and policing's no different. However, what is unique is that the police mindset doesn't shut off, particularly psychological discomfort triggered by traumatic events when officers walk into their homes at the end of the shift. Police officers offer a very unique place to study work-family conflict because of the work schedules, the risks that strain home and work lives. The third variable is burnout, which is the outcome of prolonged chronic or prolonged officer stress and work-family conflict. Burnout is a psychological syndrome comprised of 3 different dimensions. The first one is exhaustion. That's the feeling of being depleted, being overextended. I hear this and see this in officers when I ask them how they're doing. They're just completely drained. It's like a battery inside of you. You can read each other's energy. And when the police officers during a lot of the pandemic and the civil unrest were coming to work, at the beginning of their shift, that's when they should be the freshest, right? It's like Monday morning for recruits. And as the week goes on, the energy in the battery gets lower. When they're showing up for work and their battery's already low, it's a bad sign, right? That's a sign that we've definitely overextended them. The second one is cynicism. It refers to the negative and hostile detachment of the job, often includes a loss of idealism. For many of you, you would do this job for free. When I first came on, I remember saying that multiple times. As the years go on, I'm not sure that idealism is the same. You definitely see the cynicism in officers over the course of their career. And lastly is inefficacy. It refers to decline of feelings of competency in production. It's the self-evaluation dimension of burnout. And where we see this in officers is during the protests and during civil unrest and even during COVID when people were dying and we're trying to get people to stay home or do whatever precautionary measures to keep people safe. And it just felt like there was no purpose. Like, why are we doing this day in and day out? And some of the challenges with mental health, because they're so overwhelming. It's like, is there help in sight? How can we deal with this? So burnout can cause internal and external difficulties for employees. So a burned out officer tends to experience overall exhaustion, which are linked to symptoms of headache, sleep disturbance, chronic fatigue, muscle tension, gastrointestinal disorders, hypertension, and depression. A burned out individual may exhibit unfavorable work attitudes and behaviors such as increased absenteeism, withdrawal, intention to leave the job, inappropriate interactions with citizens, and excessive force. In the most extreme situations, police officers have resorted to committing suicide and suicide ideation, or the thoughts of suicide, to deal with the overwhelm of stress and burnout. Next is probably, as we continue to talk about mental health in law enforcement, but stress and, suicide and suicide ideation, or thoughts of suicide. And so the numbers are staggering, and we'll get to those in a minute. And I want to highlight a group as we talk about things and initiatives that can really help law enforcement. But I'm very proud to be part of a group. It's the National Consortium on Preventing Law Enforcement Suicide, which is funded and supported by the Department of Justice, BJA, and facilitated by the IACP. One of the products of the consortium is this toolkit. The toolkit's goal is to support agencies and departments to address officer mental health and wellness concerns. Members represent fields such as law enforcement, mental health, suicide prevention, families, and academia. This consortium is a multidisciplinary group of experts and stakeholders with a common goal of preventing officer suicide. And this is just one of the resources the consortium has created with the toolkit, which is all the information the agency needs to do to develop and implement a customized agency approach. It's a great example of a government-funded project with the inclusion of diverse stakeholders to research, create, and provide a tool that agencies of all sizes can review and implement. And so the numbers. Police officers are the helpers. They are not the helped. Police officers are problem solvers. If an officer has a broken leg, they're afforded time off, light duty status, physical therapy, compassion. When they are emotionally injured, they are fearful to ask for help, afraid of the stigma, fear of fitness for duty requirements, termination, or loss of reputation. These are the saddening and staggering numbers for line of duty deaths captured by the Officer Down Memorial page and the suicide death statistics gathered by Blue Health. If you look on the left-hand side, these were the numbers as of yesterday at 12:54. We've had 113 line of duty deaths. Those are the ones that have been classified. If you take out the COVID deaths, line of duty deaths on the far right, we've had 58 for the year, non-COVID related. To the left of that column are the suicide deaths. We have had equal numbers of suicide deaths to line of duty deaths minus COVID right now. If you see throughout the years, the numbers for suicide have been above, but usually very close to line of duty deaths. Unfortunately, officers are dying by suicide at equal numbers to dying by protecting our citizens and our communities. The preceding information is bleak. I feel bad because we've given all this doom and gloom, but there's a lot of positives to be seen from this. One of the great things is that we have a vast amount of research, and we're continuing to do research on resiliency. So in response to demands and challenges for police officers, there's a solution. Research has proven that resiliency can be a mediating factor for work-family conflict, stress, and burnout. The concept of resiliency can be referred to as the capacity for agencies and officers to draw upon individual, collective, and institutional resources to cope with and adapt and develop from the demands, the challenges, and the changes encountered during a critical incident. Most of us think of resilience as the ability to bend, not break, to bounce back, and perhaps even grow or have post-traumatic growth in the face of adversity. Resilient individuals are less negatively impacted. They recover faster. They're more likely to experience post-event growth. There's 3 different characteristics included in what resiliency is, and those are control, commitment, and challenge. They have confidence. They have that bring 'em on attitude. People are not born resilient. This is the most important thing that we can pass on to, is that resiliency isn't like IQ. It's not something that you have and that you can only expand so far. Resiliency is something that can be trained and expanded over the life course. So to quickly just move through this population study, the left is the agency demographics, the right is the sample. So the strength in this is that, as I said, there was 138 individuals who fully participated. And even though the study sample is not random, a reasonable degree of congruency between the study sample and the agency population was observed. There's 3 different questions. There was a quantitative and a qualitative piece to the study. I'm only going to focus on the qualitative piece today. But this provides insights into the officer's experiences to 3 separate open-ended questions. What are the challenges of balancing work and family? How does this impact your personal and family life? And what could the organization do to better help you balance it? The 3 questions produce over 300 responses. I was not expecting that, nor did I expect to take so long in coding all of these responses and moving forward with it. But before a theme could be acknowledged, at least half of the respondents had to mention that specific theme. And out of those 300 responses, there were 3 themes that emerged. One was organizational challenges, emotional impacts, both positive and negative, and officer support systems. So I want to start with a little bit of a visualization, if you'll just amuse me. But if you don't participate, just close your eyes for a couple seconds. Now, of course, I know, for the recruits, you may close your eyes, but then you must open them very shortly. I see you. I know. It's all right. But I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to picture somebody that you love very deeply. And imagine that they're a victim of a crime. It can be any crime, but they are visibly upset or injured. Now imagine a police officer responds to assist your loved one. What does that police officer look like? What do they sound like? How do they comfort your loved one? Are they physically fit? Do they appear able to take on the challenges? Are they emotionally intelligent to manage their own emotions and those they interact with? Are they capable and competent to provide the most professional services? Now I want you to keep that picture in the forefront of your mind as we review the comments from the officers I surveyed. I wanted you to think, is that officer able to show up every day, like the officer that you pictured to support your loved one? So some of the challenges. So mainly out of this category, we talked about organizational. So 2/3 of the officers of the female respondents said that non-flexible schedule and shift work was a major negative challenge to balancing work and family. Scheduling issues related to policing, being on call, mandatory court, training requirements, night work, inability to take personal days off. As Troy has mentioned, the staffing challenges, 12-hour rotating shifts, working holidays, and missing out on being able to be present for your family during holidays and those moments that would be important. Working shift work not only carries emotional challenges, but also physical and well-being obstacles. There's countless research articles about the challenges of shift work and the damaging effects that it has on people over the long course. In regard to emotional impacts expressed by the respondents, they also included positive impacts to them. Although more than half the officers raised concern, several officers identified that the positives of the job outweigh the negatives. Financially increased stability. It defines me as a person. Being a police officer isn't just something you're going to take off at the end of the day. It's something that consumes you all of the time. This is the most fulfilling job I've ever had and probably ever will have. Policing is truly a calling. People do this job not for the money, not for the glory, and surely not for the hugs at the end of the day, but because they feel that they want to contribute to their communities. What is certain is that policing's influence on officers does not end when they take the uniform off, but is woven into every part of their lives. The negative. Some of the officers were very succinct. I'm never off duty. I dread putting on the uniform and look forward to taking it off. Giving and giving to the division and never receiving thanks, and your family's always getting what's left over. And it interferes with my ability to perform core parenting functions. These are just some of the overwhelming responses to some of the negative impacts that officers are experiencing with the job. And officer support networks. Extremely important. The research says that officers who have strong support networks at home do better at work. They also are better in the long run with their resiliency, their burnout. These are some of the comments that, how it affects their support networks. It's not just the individual officer, but the family. But when I'm not able to answer my phone, I answer a text. My wife tells me she hates my job. Difficult to turn the trooper off when I go home. Unable to take the children certain places. And finding ways to be there for his wife and son even when he's working and not able to see him due to the schedule. And so the goals of the Senate Law Enforcement Caucus are at the top. And what I ask of you and what we need is leadership support, research that incorporates scholars, practitioners, and a diverse agency stakeholder representation, funding for research, equipment, programs, training and educational programs for officers and agencies, best practice recommendations in the form of legislation, toolkits, and publications. So just very quickly to go over these last couple of slides, policies and programs should be based on research, best practices, and input from officers' specific needs with their agencies. Every agency is going to be completely different. One thing that works for one agency is not going to fit for all agencies. They should aim at balancing awareness of signs and symptoms of stress, burnout, work-family conflict, suicide ideation with resource options and availability. Peer, supervisory, and family support and constructive coping should be emphasized and enforced. So some of the policy, I'm not going to go over these page by page just to give a couple, but it's not enough to recommend officer strategies for them to beat stress and burnout, since the majority of stress and burnout are created by organizations. That's why it's imperative that organizations take a forward-facing stance on assisting officers through different types of policies and initiatives. And these are just some of the examples. Troy also mentioned numerous examples that agencies can do. And they can start out at grassroots, smaller levels, and then grow over time. Self-care for police officers. So for our newest soon-to-be, implementing and encouraging self-care in the officers' lives to improve resiliency in high-stress work environments. It's a key step in assisting officers and their families to be more resilient. Self-care provides numerous benefits to include skill building and control for the officers and their families and loved ones. Training. In addition to support a program, no successful agency program would be effective without proper training. And this isn't just a one-time training, it has to be ongoing. I like to say from hiring to retiring, has to be recurrent. A one-time training is not going to be effective in changing the culture of law enforcement or moving the change forward. And so utilizing a lot of these different strategies over time and incrementally is exceptionally helpful. So what can the leaders do? First, lead from the front. Be a true advocate for change. Until we, take away the stigma from law enforcement to asking for help, we're not going to move forward. So we need leaders to be advocates for change and to destigmatize this. As I've said, continuing to normalize talking about mental health. We are not okay. Every time I see one of my coworkers, I'm like, how are you doing? Fine. Really? Are we fine? We just left 3 protests today. Everything's fine. Everything's always fine. So we need to talk about this more and normalize this for law enforcement. 2 resources or 2 articles if you're interested in more information. These are, obviously the ICP police chief puts out a lot of publications and has been dedicated to this for a long time. So please seek out other options and other resources. I want to thank you for your time and attention. And now I turn it over to my friend. Set up my friend here.
Thank you so much, Captain Griffin. Really appreciate you being here today. Now I'd like to welcome Brent McGinty. Brent is the president and CEO of the Missouri Behavioral Health Council. Brent is a leader in the behavioral health field from Jefferson City, Missouri. He studied history and political science at Missouri Southern State University before earning a master's in public administration at the University of Missouri. Brent originally started a career in local government, taking various positions in Columbia, Mexico, Joplin, and Maysville. A search for more family geographic stability with a new baby on the way led him to stints in the Missouri Senate and Department of Mental Health. While working for the state, Brent was inspired by the mission-driven collaborative approach of the Missouri Behavioral Health Council. Brent joined the council team in 2012 as the president and CEO. Brent is driven by the theory that treating the mind and body as one and making quality behavioral health care available to all who need it, Missourians will truly thrive. Please join me in welcoming Brent.
It's kind of nice going last. A lot of stuff I learned from the talks and the presentation, learning and just sparking ideas in my mind. I'm going to talk a little bit. I think one of the reasons I was asked to speak at this caucus presentation, I believe, is our approach that Senator Coons talked about around, someone said 18,000 different agencies out there. That's a lot of agencies. So you can start a lot of programs in an agency like one of our previous speakers did. That was a real great model. But how do you kind of take a system approach? And I think that's what Senator Blunt was talking about a little bit too, is, how do we take a system approach to really kind of move forward? And like he said, really the front line of mental health care in this country has been law enforcement and emergency rooms for so long. And I think some of the stats I'm going to show you will reveal just how much need is out there and what we found in Missouri. So I'm going to start with a little bit more the Senator Blunt CCBHC stuff, because that's really what's led to our journey with law enforcement and having better connections with law enforcement, and some of the things we're doing with our partners in the law enforcement community. So we'll go through this first. All right, there he is again. So there he is with Senator Stabenow. He mentioned that, but we were one of the original 8 states that got the demonstration, and we've been at it since 2017 now. And this thing's called the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics. And I don't know if as law enforcement, you guys love acronyms too, don't you? We're terrible with acronyms, but Senator Blunt and I were in St. Joe once, and the sheriff, we were meeting there with the sheriff up in northwest Missouri, and he said, "Senator, I don't know any of these letters or anything, but just give me more of it. Whatever this is what I want more of." Because we had used the CCBHC model in that case to put a mental health professional in his jail, in his county jail. And they used to have to take people all the time to the ERs for suicidal ideation, any of those issues. And once they had the jail mental health professional there, funded through this program of Senator Blunt and Stabenow's, They don't take anyone to the ER anymore hardly. So, but they were like, just give me more of that, please. I don't know the letters. But we have been in this program now since 2017 in Missouri. And it is focused on funding. It's focused on improving care. Increasing access is a huge issue. Really focus on system change, including that better connection with law enforcement and really health equity. So we were not reaching a lot of underserved populations, and folks weren't getting mental health care in Missouri. I'm going to go over just a few of the stats. I'm not going to go over all these, but I think what this shows is if we increased access to care this much, what's that say about the need in our communities? We were just not serving the communities the way we needed to be serving them. So a 27% increase in patient care from 2017 on, huge increase in number of veterans served. I've got a program, we're going to talk a little bit about Liaisons soon, about how we connect with law enforcement. We got an agency in Joplin that has a pretty significant population of veterans demographics, and they hired 2 military veterans, do nothing but go to military meetings, dinners, everything, and just talk mental health. And they have been incredible at increasing our access to veterans down in Southwest Missouri. You see this big number here, referrals from law enforcement. I'm going to dig into that much deeper here in just a little bit, but like Senator Blunt said, you see the ER visits going down and patients being served in this model. By increasing access, we're just trying to avoid those ER visits. And that's like the senator likes to say, it's not only morally right thing to do, it's fiscally the right thing to do. And we need to keep that going. Obviously, the medication-assisted treatment's gone up. The overdose epidemic in Missouri is just terrible, but really dramatically increasing access to that life-saving drug treatment. Just a few other numbers, satisfactions on the bottom there left. Increasing peers, follow-up hospitalizations. I love data. I'm kind of a data nerd, so there's nothing better than Excel spreadsheets for me. But prevention screening, these are all things that are part of that model that Senator Blunt and Stabenow kind of have set up, and I think ultimately is going to go national. But we track all this stuff so we can kind of prove the case in the model. Okay, so let's start getting into the law enforcement partnership. Kind of what really led, it was a perfect storm in Missouri in the sense that we started something right before CCBHC came. And then once the CCBHC model took effect in Missouri, we were able just to kind of pick up on it and grow it and make it even better. So we did start back in 2013 with an investment from our governor in something called Strengthening Mental Health Initiative. Missouri is a very kind of conservative state. And as you can imagine, after Sandy Hook, when the governor went to our Sheriff Association, Police Chief Association, said, what's missing? What can we do? The number one thing they said is we need more help in the mental health space. And our governor said, I'm going to do this Strengthening Mental Health Initiative in response to Sandy Hook and some other national events. It included things like mental health first aid training, NAMI, emergency room work to really kind of intervene there. Crisis intervention teams, I'm going to talk about that later, but I'm really going to focus on the bottom one right now. And that is something called Community Behavioral Health Liaisons. So this was a $3 million project at the time, not a lot of money. And it said, let's put some mental health professionals where they don't have to bill, they don't have to do anything but just connect with law enforcement. That's it. They spent their entire days, weeks, just connecting with law enforcement, going and meeting them where they're at and saying, I'm Brent McGinty, I'm with Compass Health. I'm here to, how can we serve you? We want to work with your CIT officers. We want to be a referral source for you. And that's what they did. They just spent relationship building. That was their whole job. And I had CEOs tell me, I don't know what you're talking about, Brent. I don't even know if we need these. I have great relationships. I know the police chief. I know the sheriff. Everything's great down here in this part of the world. And they were flat out wrong. And they tell me that now. They're like, these positions have been incredible in how we've been able to better connect. And I also want to reemphasize, this is a statewide approach. This isn't just one department. It's really connecting the local community mental health centers and now CCBHCs And these folks' only job is to make those connections better. And it's been really remarkable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is one of our CMH or CBHLs, our liaison positions, with one of our officers in Springfield, Missouri, doing a check. But they, you see the number now over in the corner is 81. We got 50 new ones funded in the budget last year based on the support of our law enforcement community saying we could use even more. But you can see what they do. They do information regarding mental health and substance use conditions and treatment. They facilitate access, all the referrals and follow-up from law enforcement, that big 70,000 some number there you saw. Where do they go? They follow up on that. In Missouri, we have that 96-hour hold, how you get someone into an inpatient psych bed. And then crisis stabilization centers, the work these folks did. I'm going to talk about Detective Klaus when I get into CIT, but as we got some money to hire a detective, so I paid the sheriff of Perry County, Missouri, 90% of that detective's time. So he's still 10% employed there and does detective work, but he's my statewide CIT coordinator. And we're going to talk CIT here in a second. But he told me, Brent, you know what? These liaisons are a fabulous resource. We love them so much. Here's the deal. And everything goes perfect sometimes. It's a 12-hour experience with someone with a mental health disorder, sitting in an ER, doing whatever. You know what we really need? We need new crisis stabilization centers in this state where an officer can just go drop someone who needs substance use or mental health help. And so we have currently right now building 12 of those. We have 6 of them operational now. And the average wait time for law enforcement is averaging 7 minutes right now at those centers. We had one officer who was in Hannibal who sent a letter to us and said, I would have had to have driven and waited in an ER, and he gave us some time that usually takes him. And he drove to St. Charles, Missouri, which is, 20-minute drive, spent 5 minutes there and was back in Hannibal. And that's what the system should look more like. And we're really excited about that. They do post trainings, behavioral health, suicide prevention, de-escalation techniques, all that. The CBHLs, that's part of their job. And so they do those trainings and we get them post approved so that the officers can, in rural Missouri, having someone come to a training for you, it's really, really important versus trying to take time off, drive somewhere else. So they really, really like those trainings to get those post credits. And then we support those positions, support those CIT councils statewide for us. And we'll see a map here soon on that. One more data nerd. This proves it, right? He really is a data nerd. So I even put this slide in there, but we really track these referrals. And this is what kind of helps convince a lot of our, along with letters from judges and letters from law enforcement, this kind of data really shows what needs out there. But it does referrals and follow up by every single center in the state of Missouri that employs these folks. And then on the other side, you can see kind of what we're dealing here with, kind of the, what happens after that referral and what's the referral for. Okay, let's talk CIT a little bit. There are right now 34 CIT councils in Missouri, 13,000 CIT trained officers, and 14,000 officers have received a mental health training from a CBHL, those positions I talked about. So you can kind of see at the map there what was when we started. And that's when kind of that funding took effect from the governor and the council started kind of managing, and we hired the CIT coordinator to where we are now in Missouri. You can see it's been quite a bit of growth. And those CIT councils, we call them, are you have to meet certain requirements to turn blue. But the director of the Department of Mental Health told me, Brent, he's retired now, but he said at some point this map better be all blue. And I'm like, okay, we're going to really try. But we keep working on it. But those councils are so great because, think about it. At the table, you have local leaders, you have hospitals, other social service agencies, our CIT officers, our mental health professionals, all sitting in a room together saying, what are we missing here? What's not working well? And how can we get it better? And just one small example, we had the late law enforcement officers to drive up to the psych unit in Jeff City, for instance. was just taking them so long, and they worked out this entire drop-off system in conjunction with the Jefferson City Police Department that saves those folks like 2 hours in time every time they had a transport. So it's those kind of just small little working together kind of deals that can really improve care for people and reduce a lot of work for law enforcement. So I promise you I'm going to get to the law enforcement self-care soon. All right, but in summary, let's read this. This is one quote from a police chief. We believe the CBHL program, one of the most valuable programs we've seen in law enforcement in the past 40 years. So those kind of comments, we get a lot of really great letters of support from our judges and police departments across the state. So let's get into wellness. So imagine we hired those original 31 and now we're up to 81, and they start working with CIT, they start working with law enforcement. I was told this is a big deal. One of our CBHLs got the key to the law enforcement building. So they can just fob right in now. They're that trusted as a resource. So it's that kind of relationship gets developed. So you start having this trusted relationship. You ride with the officers a lot, and all of a sudden they start talking to you like, oh, I really trust this man or woman, and I'm going to start talking to them. And it's like this built-in therapy, and it's wonderful. And then they start saying, hey, would you mind talking to my friend? I think they're really struggling. And so they started talking to them, and pretty soon there'd be say there was an accident, something really tragic, really tough, and they'd say, would you come in and talk to us, and all these things. And it happens over and over and more to the point where it got difficult to kind of do the follow-up for the community, and it's because it was just the need was so great. So we still do that. Our liaisons still are a resource that if people need them, they're dedicated and they will do the work. But we also realized we probably need to develop a better system. And so we did develop something we call the First Responder Provider Network, kind of like what we heard earlier, that peer-to-peer. There's a lot of folks out there that even had military experience or law enforcement experience and got into therapy. And so who are those folks, and who will be a part of this network that we can kind of advertise and say, look, you may not want to go into a clinic. You may not want to go see someone that you don't know. But look, these folks have background, and they're willing to do a telehealth visit with you so you can do it from home. But we have that advertised and out on our website and promoted through all the different associations. I think it's up to like 41 therapists now across the state that are willing to do that. You kind of see some of the other things we do, post-critical incident seminars. We do something called the Missouri CIT Conference, which is one of my favorite. It's up to, I think, almost 600 people attend that every year. And it's the way our CIT officers and our mental health liaisons and therapists get together. And so I love the crowd of that when I look out. It's like law enforcement and mental health professionals, and they're all mingling and they're doing trainings together. It's our highway patrols there. And we do all kinds of things together like that. And I think it really helps us kind of bridge some gaps in culture and how we relate to each other, from the mental health side to law enforcement. And I just really dig that. Senator Blunt's been kind enough to do a lot of our intros for those kind of events. We do a first responder wellness series. Again, we have a statewide CIT coordinating committee that helps us with all this stuff. Building resiliency, we did first responder training. Wellness events, we do a lot of those different things across the state. We're putting a wellness app out to try to get at some of those meditation and breathing and things like that could get online resource for people quickly. So we're doing a lot of work trying to get into how we can better support our law enforcement officers and through all these different things we're doing. And it just came from a relationship. And I always think that's really the key part is having people that are there on the ground all the time with that knowledge. Because what happens far too often, I think the captain said it, you do a one-off training and say, well, we did it. Well, that's great. What I found is if you don't have someone just dedicated to a relationship, people leave, retire, whatever, it can just fall apart so quickly. But if you have someone that's their job, that's what they do. And then that really can develop over time into some really positive outcomes. So that's kind of what we're doing in Missouri, using this new national model. I hope that's going to be national soon, to kind of build in all these support systems that we can build into that model have the payers pay it through that rate that's built into that whole model. And this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to get done in Missouri. So I'll stop there. Thank you all.
Yeah, why not? You want us to go sit up there?
Thank you very much, Brent. At this time, we're gonna spend a few minutes talking. Yes, sir. Okay, hold it.
I like the enthusiasm.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
question already.
Yeah, he's got enthusiasm. We have some time for question and answers. If I know Troy has prepared some questions in advance,
Not as good as yours.
so if we're in more of a listening mode, that's okay. But hopefully we do have some questions. So I'm gonna let Troy, you field the questions.
Listen, I know this is a heavy subject. It certainly isn't, especially for you folks that are just going into law enforcement. It isn't all about doom and gloom. It's the greatest job in the entire world. You just have to be ready to take care of yourself to do it. And if you can't make that commitment to yourself, then it's going to be a really rough road. It's not a matter of whether, if you're going to encounter traumas along the way that are difficult. It's just a matter of when. And then how are you going to take care of yourself? And I know at this age, and at this stage of your career, you feel like you're genetically predisposed to being able to handle anything. I was there once too, but listen, it really is about recognizing that right now you're as mentally and physically healthy as you could be. Right? You're in training. You're really right there. You want to stay there. You want to stay there for your long career. So we'll field some questions. If anybody has any questions, I would love to hear them. There we go. Yeah, let's hear who you are.
My name is Malik Loggins. I got a question for you.
Yes, please.
So it might be a little dumb question, but I wanted to know, how did you go about being a state trooper? How do you become a state trooper?
Wait a minute. Just for the record, I was a state trooper first, all right? But no, I know who you directed it to, so that's no.
I do have business cards for anybody who's interested also.
Recruitment.
I'm always recruiting. But for us, it's a very long process. It's usually most law enforcement agencies, state police agencies, were 9 months to 10 months to get people through. So it's like a multi-step. So it's a written test, a physical test, psychological interviews that you have to sit and be, graded on. And then if you progress, you go into psychological, medical, and then our academy is a 6-month live-in academy. We have a 26-week. So you show up on Monday morning, you leave your devices and everything in the car, you get to bring your keys in, you spend the entire week with no technology or contact with the outside world. So we really kind of keep a very structured learning environment. We're very fitness-based too. We feel very strongly about having officers be able to physically respond to the job and deal with it. And then on Friday night, you get to go home to your families and do it all again on Monday morning. So we're very proud of the academy and the atmosphere that we have. I was very proud to work at the academy for 2 years as the director, but it's a very grueling process to get in, and it's a very long process during the academy. But the product is very good. The officers that come out are very successful. They're able to handle the demands of the job in a very professional way. So.
Don't forget, you have to shave your head too.
Oh, you do?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's part of it.
I got another question. I got something. But so I've heard a lot of conversations about police officers' mental health. But in your opinion, what do you believe can be the solution to police officers' mental health, even though they're making the job harder for us?
Right, so I would say, I like to think of the analogy like law enforcement, all of you are coming into the job, new police officers come in, it's like putting on a fresh backpack, right? You're young, you're very fit. We hire mentally healthy officers, right? When they come on the job, they're mentally healthy. Over time, every traumatic issue that you have is like picking a stone up and putting it in a backpack. And over the course of a 30-year career, the backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And so that's why resiliency training, resources like Brent is providing, that wasn't the plan to have a mental health provider riding with a police officer who then turned into the police officer's mental health provider. But those touch points, whether it be resiliency training, having the opportunity to have mental health providers at your beck and call 24 hours a day is the most important thing. And that's what keeps officers able to retire after 30 some years of policing and a military history, that they can continue to be married and have families and go on to retire. Unfortunately, the death for police officers after retirement, the life expectancy is not great. And a lot of that's cardiovascular, but it's also stress induced. And so if you can stay physically fit and mentally fit, you'll have a great career. And when you're done with it, you'll be able to have, continue on with having a good family and having a good quality of life.
Good.
James Parker, I wanted to know, like, what's y'all personal why SCI, like our motivation every day, other than like on law enforcement and stuff like that.
How about you start that?
All right.
My motivation is, I came to the field for, 15, 17 years now. There's very little in this world that seems to be bipartisan or seems to be agreed upon. And this seems to be an area that finally has gotten to a point where we're like, this is really important. And legislation passing Congress seems to be, the bipartisan stuff seems to be a lot of mental health things that we've realized as a country that we've kind of just hidden it and buried it. And the stigma is so powerful. And the idea that seeking help is weakness and you're not tough and you're not strong. And that breaks down pretty dang quick. And you find, I don't know if I talk to a legislator or any group where I get told some side story about a personal connection, deep personal connection to a family member, to a friend, to someone that they've been in contact with, that they know that needed help and didn't get it or had a really bad outcome. And then occasionally you get the story of how it was just incredibly important, that help. When it got there, it saved someone's life. So I'm motivated, very motivated to keep doing the work I'm doing, because the stories I get to hear on the positive side, we all hear the bad ones. It's on the news all the time. But those stories on the positive side, when we have a really bad incident, our CBHL says, I got this call and I went and talked, and the outcome was good. They said it helped me talk to you. That kind of stuff is it's a good spot to be in. It feels good, and that's important for the work I do.
Mm-hmm. I'll say for me, it's really a few things. The first thing, the most important thing, my motivating factor, is my 3 daughters. They're the most important thing in my world, and to be always, when I was doing my job, regardless of whether I was in a suit and tie or I was in a uniform, was always to get home for them, because I know what it looks like when somebody doesn't make it home. I know what those families look like. And I never wanted to put my kids through that, so I made sure that I always went the extra distance. I will say the second piece to that is how I found my way home, and it was simple. I always treated everybody in the field like I would expect everybody to treat my mother. And if you treat everybody like that, you're gonna have a terrific career, because hopefully everybody would want your mom to be treated well. And if you treat people with respect and dignity, usually they treat you like that in kind. If you treat a person like a dog, dogs bite. See, that's kind of a simple equation. Remember that one? So I just treated people like I want people to treat my mom, and that seemed to work out well. And the last piece is I'm a Boy Scout. Not really, I used to be. But I always wanted to leave things a little bit better than I found. That was always my plan. So if I could leave whatever community I was working in, and I worked for the state police in Connecticut, but regardless of what my role was, I just wanted to leave it better. Even if I was working in an unfavorable role, like in internal affairs, where I worked for a while, I didn't want to work there, but I still wanted to make it better because I knew that it was a practice that was necessary. So always leave it better. But I think I always approached my career with those basic tenets and help me get through.
I guess for me, so working a lot of protests that we had, and then, with civil unrest, people were like, why would you stay? Like, you could go in other places, you could teach other places, you have other opportunities. And I said, this is the worst time to be in law enforcement. This is the best time to be in law enforcement because of the opportunities. And I'm driven every day because I want to do better for the people that I serve. I'm fortunate to have, 50 some troopers that, I consider them my family. And my husband's a trooper, so my daughter has two parents who are troopers. That probably is not the best situation for a kid. But you know, I want to set a good example for her. You know, a woman in law enforcement going out and serving her community and making the best and helping other people every day. So that's what drives me, you know, every morning to get up and put the uniform on and go to work.
Before we get to our next question, I think this is a genuine question that everybody in this room is thinking about. And who outranks who in your family, you or your husband?
Me, in all cases. That's what I say. Yeah, I am.
Can you only imagine Christmas morning when it's open present?
He has the fun job. I like this. He's a helicopter pilot. He's a scuba diver on our state police team. He has the most fun jobs. He gets to do really fun things. And a lot of my day is, you know, paperwork, policy, sometimes a little discipline, but yeah.
But not him, just, you know.
Yeah, he's just fun all day long.
He just has fun.
It's just fun all
And he
day
gets to
long.
call you captain too.
Yeah.
All right, what other questions do we have? Right here in the middle, please.
So how about the other opposite end of the spectrum? 37 years in law enforcement. What I haven't really seen is, well, I'll reverse it. Command staff stress and mental health for command staff. I see a lot of grant money coming from the federal government focused on line officers and the trauma from the line. But for me, I don't know your experience, but the most stressful time in my life has been in the command level with the politics and the interaction among the ranking folks. It's really stressful. And then we push that on to our officers. What's out there as far, or is there any focus on command staff training and how to have them, you know, support on the end of the spectrum?
Want to touch on that first?
Yeah, there's actually a couple research studies, but nothing at the level of what we're doing with line of duty, you know, first line supervisors or line officers. And I think probably some of that is because there's still a resistance at that command level to say, I am struggling. I am not dealing well with this, or this is a challenge, you know, because when you get to that level, you're supposed to have it all together, right? And so I think a lot of it is just a lack of acknowledgement that there's stress there. I think that I know that there's been several conferences that we've talked about that, about chiefs and above, like those levels of the stress, but it's a different stress, right? It's not the, I'm worried about coming home every day because I'm gonna get stabbed at work. It's more of, you know, just the 24-hour challenges. And now that we have cell phones, or I have 2 cell phones now, so you're always tethered and you never get a break. And so there's no work-family divide or work divide because you're 24 hours on. So it's definitely an area that needs more research and it needs more,
Maybe in your
resources.
travels, you could talk to funders and say they need to fund some studies on that end.
Because there's a great group of chiefs, right? We have a lot of ways to reach out to chiefs, both current and retired, to survey them on stress and burnout and things like that. So it's a great suggestion, and there's a lot of
Right, and I don't just mean chiefs, I mean command level, you know,
level.
lieutenants and above that are dealing with the, you know, the opposite, you know, they could be doing something and then they're in the newspaper, or there's a Uvalde, Texas, and then we all take on that, my God, we're getting the heat
right.
and feeling stressed because some officers did something that was not popular or not proper. It's really stressful.
So I think in the short term, there's some Band-Aid fixes for that. So if that's in response to that sort of thing, whether it's creating something through maybe like IACP, right? So the chiefs of police, or whether it's creating peer support programs, which I know chiefs are, you know, at one point they were normally rank and file folks. And that kind of brings me to my second point, which is that when you look at recruit training now, it's not the same as when you and I went through. It's changed significantly, right? We learned how to, at least in my case, you know, you made your rack, you shine your shoes, you learn motor vehicle and criminal law, but there really wasn't that component for that checkup from the neck up, right? Taking care of yourself psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. That wasn't something that we talked about. In fact, it was actually frowned upon to talk about that stuff. It was, you know, suck it up and drive on. That was really the approach. But what you're seeing now, and certainly what we're seeing in my old agency, and I only retired last year. I'm not that old. I kind of am old, but that's not the point. What we're seeing now is some of those folks that I trained years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, that I trained when they were recruits, are now progressing through the ranks and then they're troopers and then they become sergeants. And now some of them, because of attrition and people leaving for a myriad of reasons, now you're starting to see those people getting into command staff positions, management positions. But they already know, they get it, right? They appreciate the peer support program. They encourage debriefings as opposed to dissuading people from them. So they have that network, which is fantastic. And I would imagine that in 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, as it just continues to be interwoven in the fabric of these agencies individually. And I think that that's so important why we need to talk about this on a national level, because isolated pockets are great for Connecticut or Delaware, but what's happening in another part of the country where maybe they don't have those people that are dedicated full time? What are they missing out on? And why should the life of Connecticut State Trooper be any different than somebody who's in a small rural area in a place that we've never heard about? The life value is equal, and they should have access to those programs. Saying that they don't have funding and saying that they don't have a full-time employee to solely dedicate to doing that, I think that that's sort of a lackluster, shortfall excuse. I don't think we should have that. We need to look at things like, what can we do to implement these programs? And saying that we're doing studies and offering grants are fine, but offering grant money to a small agency, unless they're maybe practicing regionalization or statewide like you're doing with the CIT program, which I think is phenomenal. And CIT, I couldn't say enough good about it. And for those of you who don't know enough about this, go read about this Memphis model and understand what it's about. And we had it in the Connecticut State Police, and it is changing for the people in the field. It is life-changing for the officers that have that person that they can go with. No different than when we send one of our troopers out to do a death notification now, we send them with a chaplain, because that chaplain deals with death. They understand what it's like to deal with grieving, because nobody really deals with that other than a doctor or a nurse more than a chaplain. They're doing hospital visits. They're doing funerals all the time. They're dealing with bereavement and families that are in crisis. So we would send a chaplain out. So having that clinician that can go out to deal with somebody who's in a mental health crisis, it saves the officer time and money. And quite frankly, when you look at how they're trained, it's like this, right? The clinician's trained to deal with that. They are to some degree a brain scientist, and police aren't. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to sort of triage and do what they can and move on. So you want to talk about CIT a little? Because I couldn't say enough good about it.
No, sure. I'd love to take back Major Ivy, retired out of the Kansas City Police Department. He was one of our big trainers. I'd like to talk to him about what we're doing. And I wonder if it's anything, but I'll be curious. I'll take that back. I appreciate that question. But on CIT, it has, and I also wonder your point about what's changing training wise, if it has anything to do with the map too. More and more leaders are understanding that, look, this is really important for many reasons. But yeah, the CIT program, we took it over as far as kind of with our statewide CIT coordinator, kind of managing it, promoting it, and offering those trainings for free, so that we can go to, say, a community and say 6 law enforcement agencies can send people that. It's a full Memphis model we followed pretty closely for a long time. And it was 40 hours, a full week. That's a pretty big lift for some of our agencies. So we've got approval to do once a day for 5 weeks model. And a lot of law enforcement officers like that model better. But it is intensive. Our CMH, our CBHLs, our liaisons are part of the training team. We bring in folks in recovery or living with mental illness to go through their perspectives on things. And it really does teach, I think, officers. We know we can't teach every officer a full 40-hour a week CIT, but to have enough across the state in enough agencies that when there's really an event that is more appropriately handled by someone who's gone through the training, they get the CIT pin that they wear on their uniforms. It's really important. The pin on a uniform means something, and they wear that very proudly.
Police love pins, don't they?
They love it's a good pin on there, and I've done ride-alongs with them on follow-up calls, and I have so much respect for what you do. I imagine this, I'm in the Kansas City, one of the buildings there, walking out with 2 CIT officers to do well-check follow-up visits. As we walk out the door, the SWAT squad is getting ready to go do something, and they're in the full bulletproof with all the automatic weapon looking stuff that you guys, somebody does, all the gadgets,
Accoutrement,
all,
yeah.
all the stuff. And so that's the in one department, right? I know it's different units probably, but still just think of that responsibility that you all have, and that variation in roles is really pretty amazing.
We have so I'm really excited. I love the CIT. I mean, if you're in this realm of officer safety and wellness, so for me, officer and safety wellness is community safety and wellness. If we have well officers responding to complaints and they're emotionally intelligent and they're able to handle their own emotions and those that they're dealing with, we're going to have a better outcome. And so I'm lucky I get to teach the last day of our CIT. We do a 40-hour model in Delaware. And, you know, it's always great to get the last day because you kind of like learned, and they've had so many great discussions. And I always like, what have you learned? I'm like, give me your name, your agency, what you want to get out of this training. You know, what have you learned? And frequently the thing they always come back with is, I wish I would have known this when I was a new trooper coming out or an officer. You know, I'm going to be better, not just at work, but I'm going to be better at home. You know, and so these are skills like these resiliency and CIT and leadership training. You know, we do a resiliency and stress management for our first line supervisors and those who are going into leadership roles. And the thing that they always say is, I wish I would have had this earlier. You know, we're getting to these people when they're getting to be supervisors, maybe 10, 15 years in, and they've had a lot of people they've talked to. And so for us, we've made the commitment. We do the FBI National Academy Associates Comprehensive Officer Resiliency Program. It's a 12-module class, and we do it almost, you know, week one of the academy. We start doing resiliency training. We do it the entire recruit training so that when they leave, they've had that, plus in addition to all the mental health training. So for us, kind of those same things, incorporating it throughout somebody's career is probably going to be the model that we need to follow moving forward.
Excellent. I think on that note, we'll probably begin to wrap things up a little bit. I want to thank you, Brent and Captain Griffin, for coming out and sharing your insight, your knowledge, and your expertise. Certainly want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your schedules to come and be with us. Your insightful questions as well, and staying engaged. And thank you for your service, for what you're about to do, what you're doing already, what you have ahead of you. It's I'm envious. I wish I could start again and do it again. I'd do it 100 times again. It was the greatest job in the world, and I'm fortunate at this stage in my career that I can still work with people who are doing that job. And I will extend me to you. You can always find me. Just go in the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. Easy website to find. Find it, and then you'll see under Officer Safety and Wellness, there's a guy that looks just like me. That's because it's me. And you just click. His email is right there. Just click on that guy, and then you can send me a message. Go ahead. Get a question? What's that? Oh, all right. Well, we're just doing our wrap up. So I thought you had something you wanted on that. Maybe you could send it to me in that email I was just talking about. But anyway, listen, we're a resource for you here. This building is here for you. This campus is here for you. The memorial across the street is for you. Feel free to join us, be a part. We're always a resource to you. Check out Destination Zero, our officer safety and wellness programs. Look at what we're doing, and I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. Thanks again.